when players or when fans cross the line, the justification might come from they see something that was unfair or a play was called that wasn't right or whatever it might be. And so they justify in their mind the action that we know is not okay.
Welcome back to the Anything But Quiet Time podcast. We are Rachelle and Carder.
Can I pound on God's chest? Maybe the question should have been, should I?
Should I do that?
Should I pound on
We acknowledged
God's
some of that last week where we want to be real with our emotions.
We do, but at the same time, just like I would hope that my children, even though they might come to me disgruntled about something, and both of them, by the way, would never say the word disgruntled. They
would just say mad.
I am overwhelmingly blessed. My cup runneth over, if you will, if they exude self-control and they bring an argument of sound mind. It's like come to me and say, hey, I feel a certain way about this. And this is, what I think. And this is why I think it this way, as opposed to just, pounding on my chest.
Yeah. Right.
And so I'd imagine that God truly appreciates and sees the work of growth in us when we calm ourselves before him, no matter what the circumstances are. Because yes, there's going to be moments of pain, unbelievable pain and grief. And I have failed miserably in the not pounding on God's chest department at times. But I don't want to stay in a place of immaturity. I want to grow in him. And I want to, that means that I trust him too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's hard. I mean, I think people have used that way too loosely. It's okay to pound on God's chest. He can take it. But I think you're getting to the point of, but should we? Mm-hmm. And yet we also don't want to be robots and go, everything's fine. It's like, because he knows our heart anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But we see it in I know I do, in my children who are becoming adult men. One of them is now an adult. And I see him calm himself. And before he speaks, he's thinking it through.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that as a parent, even if I might disagree with what he shares.
Sure.
But now he's sharing, he's not disputing, he's not angrily spewing out things that should not be said in a respectful situation. You are my child, and he is still honoring his mother and his father, which you can do and disagree with your parents and still honor them, right?
And how much more, because every analogy with God breaks down somewhere where it's like, how much more for a holy, reverent God?
Yeah.
A holy, perfect God that I have offended with sin, and yet is so loving to me. But, then it's still applicable to there's that contrast where Jesus says, you who are evil, when you give a good gift to your kids, right? And so even though that's true for us, right, we want to be respected as parents, but man, of all people that deserve the most respect is God.
I think if you need a reminder, a refresher about his awesomeness, he gives that lovingly and at times sarcastically to Job.
Sure.
At the end of the book of Job, God invites Job with his own questions, because Job has been questioning, where's God and why is he allowed and blah, blah, blah. And God's like, why don't you answer some of my questions? And then he lays out these beautiful, one right after the other, examples of his majesty and his creator's genius. I mean, just look at the things around you, Job. Remember who I am.
Yeah.
And it's so important that we do, because as children of God through Jesus Christ, there have been times, and every day I struggle with a familiarity that I think he wants us to have in relationship with him, but balancing that familiarity with respect and honor, so that, my mom and dad and we have a good time, but at the same time, they are still my elders. They are my parents. And even if I disagree with them, I'm going to hopefully show them honor and respect, because they're due that, because God says they are.
Right.
And that's true for my children and I in relationship to them, as my youngest is now growing into a man and my oldest is now in college, So how do we find that balance? The Holy Spirit helps us with all of that, because I think, first of all, Jesus doesn't look at us the way other people do. He looks at our heart, and he encourages us with the story of David. When Samuel comes to David's house and he's looking at Jesse and the sons, and he's like, ooh, all these guys are really looking pretty good for the kingship. And it's David who God chooses, and he reminds Samuel, I don't look at the outward appearance. I look at your heart. So I'm seeing the effort that you're making right now in wanting to be respectful of me, but make sure that's always like you've ticked that box.
Sure.
In your mind and in your heart, tick that box. And Job, like after God just basically goes, what about this? And like all the little things that Job had brought up in conversation prior to, and we're talking about like 30 some odd chapters of Job, like where's God? And he's not been understanding and all this stuff. And God only shares a few things in the next couple of chapters that follow Job's questions and even his friends' ponderings and accusations. And Job says, okay, I know that you can do anything and no one can stop you. This is the 42nd chapter of Job. You asked, who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorance? It's I. And I was talking about things I knew nothing about, things far too wonderful for me. You said, listen, and I will speak. And I have some questions for you, and you must answer them. I had only heard about you before, though. Now Job saying, you said those things, but now I have seen you with my own eyes, and I take back everything I said, and I sit in dust and ashes to show my repentance. I've been put in my place, but yet there's still a loving God because he chooses to gift Job. It doesn't say that Job asked for any gift. He didn't say, will you restore all the things that were taken from me? You know, he lost his house. If you haven't watched the last episode, I kind of share what happened with Job. But I mean, just devastating stuff, right? But God gives it all back to him because he wants to. And there was a verse that really stood out when he said, I had only heard about you before, but now I have seen you. I want my faith and my relationship with the Lord to be mine and his, you know, in a jealous good way, like a godly jealousy. Like I don't want it to be anybody else's relationship. It's like the same way that I'm jealous for my husband's affections, right? Sure. I want this to be my own relationship. And yeah, other people are going to tell you one thing. Experiencing and tasting and seeing Jesus for yourself. And that's what happens here with Job. He's like, oh my word. The glory, the majesty, the creator. I'm dust.
Right.
I have no place to be asking these questions. He loves you. He loves me. He absolutely did. And he died for me. Makes it even more unfathomable, right? At the same time, the honor and respect that he is due, we will never be able to match what he is due. So if I always have that in mind, I think that will lovingly honor him, and he sees that and he cherishes that. And it has become in my heart and in my life something I think I've been challenged by. Not that I'm trying to be disrespectful, but there is a flippancy almost in knowing who Jesus is. That's my buddy. Yeah, he's my buddy.
He's our friend. Yeah.
And he should be. And that does not change. But just like any other relationship, there is a hallowed thing about that friendship, or if it's your spouse or your children or whatever, there are lines you don't cross because it's a respect situation. It's the same with God.
Sure.
So, but yeah, just being mindful of those lines and having the Holy Spirit show you, Lord, you are holy, you are just. You are all the things that you say you are. Now, I either believe it or I don't. So I need to trust you in this moment. And I can do that first by not pounding on your chest.
Yeah.
And just laying it down at your feet and saying, I don't understand. And for now, leaving it with you, that's going to have to be enough.
There are many people that, outright unbelievers, atheists, there's whether it's on TikTok or wherever, that people will say, if God's real, then he's evil. Because of if you're all powerful, then you can't be all loving if all of this has been allowed. Mm-hmm. And I think the philosophical thing that I've heard is, well, you are overlooking the idea that something that is allowed can be used for good. But I think where I want to, because that's obviously irreverent, right? For somebody to say if the Almighty Creator is real, then I wouldn't worship him. I mean, really, people say that I'd rather go to hell than be in the presence of this evil God. And that is completely, I mean, it's blasphemous, really. But what I don't want to do is let any of that seep in of causing doubt of, well, why did that child have to die or anything? Because it's hard questions. I mean, I don't know, but the respect, it just as you go to the end of Job, right? Where were you when all this plan was put into motion?
Yeah.
Do you know the wisdom that I truly have, and the dust that you come from, and the power that I have to literally wipe away every tear? And that mean, that's in Revelation, and that mean that all despair will be gone forever, and that we will see truly that all of it was perfect. The evil things were allowed, but his plan was perfect.
I think it's important to share that if there is a person that that has said things that are either borderline or full-on heretical, blasphemous, as you were just sharing, there's still room at the table for those people. I feel like in those situations, there's a lot of people who talk out of just an absence of truth and knowledge. They're naive. They don't understand it. So if we've come to a place of saying yes to Jesus, even I don't fully understand why that thing happened to that person. It just doesn't make sense to me. I have still accepted that Jesus Christ is Lord. It does not change who he is. It might have to take an adjustment on my part to go that he is above me in a way that my pay grade that I don't even see how he's going to connect those dots. But I do know that I trust him. I know Jesus Christ and him crucified. I can hang my faith and my hope on that.
Yeah.
And that will somehow work itself out together for good, according to Romans 8:28. It's a passage I believe for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. For those who do not know Jesus and who are still questioning and have not come under the house, if you will, like if we're in the house, the body of Christ, we have received Jesus as Lord and Savior. We've said yes to him. So there is kind of like, even with, just think of the movie Hunt for Red October, and there's this incredible moment where Sean Connery's character is about to defect the submarine. Oh gosh, spoiler alert. But this did come out in the 80s.
I think you've had plenty of buffer to ruin it.
Sean Connery's about to defect, and Sam Neill finds out. Sam Neill, who was in Jurassic Park, is incredible second to the first command there on this Russian vessel. And all of the people that find out that he's going to do this thing that are on his staff are freaking out. Like, what are you talking about? And Sam Neill's character is like, Captain knows what he's doing. He does not question him in front of anybody else. And he ushers them outside. When he's alone with the captain, even then he shows the utmost respect and asks for forgiveness for doubting, but I'm not quite certain, I feel like that is kind of the relationship that I always want to have with the Lord. Like, Lord, you and I are tight. I don't really get a chance to ask you this, why you would do this, but I feel like we have that comfortability, and I always want to stand for truth no matter who else is denying it.
Yeah.
There are people that aren't even on our ship yet, They're not on the ship. They are not under the command of Sean Connery on this scenario. And so I have to have grace for when they ask these tough questions, because you know what? If you're searching and you are contemplating these difficult things, more than likely you have experienced great pain, and you don't need my rebuke in the moment. So I'm careful to not step into a place of telling them that they're being, heretical or whatever. God welcomes, I believe, truly, he welcomes your questions, those people. He welcomes those types of questions because you're on a mission to seek. And he promises that you will find.
Sure.
Unless, of course, you're just wanting to sling arrows and mud.
Yeah.
And then you're in a position that you're just really not looking for answers, are you? You just want to prove a point that you're allowed to either stay where you're at in no belief system, or the one that you've grown accustomed to, or what have you. But I don't know. I think there's an appropriate place for questions where, I think in those cases, I think God's okay with you pounding on the chest. I don't know how to, I wouldn't know the line.
I think because we talked about earlier, it's with like Psalms, right? David or the psalmist in different chapters asks some hard questions. Why is this allowed? How long will my enemies hunt for me? Those type of things. And then at the end, it always wraps up
with praise.
But you are God.
But you are God, yeah.
You are holy. And to recognize that, just like our bosses, why was this decision made for the company? But you're the boss.
Right.
Right. You got to come back to that at a point. Otherwise, you will be bitter and jobless potentially in that scenario.
Yeah. I never want to mistake my relationship with God, the one on the ship with the captain, as being somebody that can do the other thing where, what about this? Well, what about that? I mean, if you want to switch roles, then we're walking into a heresy.
Right. Yeah.
But at the same time, wanting to mention that the people who are saying, a good God is not this God, this is a bad God, it may be for a very pain-filled reason, probably is.
Yeah.
A lot of people go to atheism because of such questions. If God existed, how could ... Yeah. So hinging our belief system not on what we think is good, but on what God deems to happen, and trusting that the outcome will be good.
Yeah, that's good. You were talking about pounding on God's chest. What about pounding people's faces?
Okay, so are we talking about like in a sports arena?
No.
Okay, because for some reason people throw the Bible out when it comes to sports, and I think that's
with our fanhoods? Yes. Yeah, that's true.
You are one of them. My husband and my children are like, Mom, you don't understand. This is baseball.
Yeah, well, I think there's a line of certainly morality where I think there are situations where you're truly hating somebody, you're tweeting or Xing, whatever it is now, and it's like you should probably be a little more kind or whatever. At the same time, when it comes to just, I think the perfect example for me of handling it the right way is Derek Jeter with the New York Yankees. Speaking of respect, I respect him so much.
Yeah.
Kind of like a Tom Brady.
Sure.
Or if you're not a Bulls fan, Michael Jordan, respecting that. But that doesn't mean I'm going to root for them. They don't play for my team.
Yeah.
Right? And so that good fan razzing, I think, is totally appropriate of Jeter, boo! But then, just like all the Red Sox fans booed him forever.
Yeah.
Because that's the most heated rivalry maybe in sports. And his very last trip to Fenway Park, they gave him a standing ovation. Just recognizing the excellence.
Yes.
And you're going to have, I'm sure, some yahoos in the crowd still saying stuff about his family and all this stuff that should never happen.
Right.
But I think there's a good competitive nature that is within bounds, to use a sports analogy.
And I think it's also important to know that I think sports is one of those things that I don't personally understand. I've never been a giant sports fan, and it's very easy for me to even get, this maybe sounds silly for sports fans. It can be judgmental for me because I'm like, you're not applying anything that the Bible says. And I was always of the belief system, my dad would tell me to invite Jesus into every aspect of my life.
Didn't you? So weren't you at a game and everybody started booing and then your kids started booing?
And I was like, honey, we don't boo.
And then what did your husband say?
This is baseball.
Of course we boo.
We boo at baseball. And I'm like, I don't understand. Yeah. So I have to be careful because I'm like, all right, I don't think this is like you said, is this a morality issue? If it becomes so, then you're stepping into sin territory.
There's clear times where even the player, these professionals that I think it can go over the line, right? Where you're a professional. You have to take everything. And some players in recent years have fought back, so to speak. Not that they do everything right, but it's like, you can say what you want about me. You're not going to bring up my family. You're not going to do that.
Sure.
And I think that is an issue. And you don't get to just say whatever you want just because they're on the court. At the same time, a person like Derek Jeter, I've heard him, talk about, of course you're going to get booed when you go to Fenway Park. That's the game, baby.
That's the game.
And that's the...
Because he's holding it like this.
He knows the culture that has been built over 100+ years of what baseball is, and the fans are a part of that game.
You've got to hold it loosely. Otherwise, when players do cross a line or when fans cross a line, the justification might come from a They see something that was unfair or a play was called that wasn't right or whatever it might be. And so they justify in their mind the action that we know is not okay.
Right.
And so then here's the problem with sin, though. It's like, well, they justified they did that thing because they did that thing.
Right.
And now I'm on board with them doing that thing because it was wrong. Well, that was wrong. And you see, after a while, we just start layering. And then it becomes this fight. I have seen people because I was at one time a huge basketball fan. I was a Bulls fan. We watched all the games, all 6 championships. The in-between time where we were seeing, are you going to try to do baseball, Michael? And he didn't really do it very well, but he wasn't horrible. Anyway, the point is, I remember when they won one year and people were coming out of the Chicago Stadium, like overturning vehicles.
Yeah.
And you're like, what is...
I don't think that's a reason.
What is happening when adrenaline takes over your moral choices?
Yeah.
Beware.
That's honestly, I had to tell my grandma the same thing about her knitting shows.
I would imagine.
Yeah, the craft shows that she.
I mean, especially when they knit.
Yeah.
When they knit one pearl too.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And if they get on that like loop.
No, it is an interesting. I think there's such a crossover because you hear it from football coaches. There are life lessons in football.
Oh, yeah.
You know, how to depend on team and all that. And so I think there are moral lessons within sports.
Yes.
And it is...
There's a hard one to find in The Water Boy, but you're right.
Well, I didn't say all sports movies. Just it's sports in general.
But you get a kick out of this. We watched The Water Boy for the first time. Please, I don't even remotely recommend this movie. Okay.
We're watching it with Rachelle was more intelligent than that.
My kids, they were like, we just want to laugh. And I'm like, what about The Water Boy? After it's over, I swear, my Asperger's boy, who's so literal about everything, I was like, wow, that was like right there. That was like, Remember the Titans. And he looks at me and goes, that was not. That was not like.
Absolutely not. No.
I know, honey. I was making a stupid joke. Anyway.
No, it is an interesting, I don't know, you go all day with that, with sports and life lessons, but then also learning of what is truly right and truly wrong and what you can learn from it. And the big things that always sticks out in our mind are things that are bigger than sports. When I never remember his name, but I've showed Ezra this video. My son is 4, and we watched this a few times. The Olympian that goes down in track. He's a British Olympian.
Yeah.
And he goes down with an injury, and here comes his dad out of the
His dad is amazing.
and carries him to the finish line.
Oh, it's beautiful.
That is just, you can't recreate anything like that for a father to. What an analogy for biblical love.
I know,
honestly.
it's the prodigal son. But at the same time, I have to be mindful, whether it's sports or something else. If you have a lot of stress in your life and things have been building up and you haven't taken it to God in a respectful way, saying, Lord, I really am overwhelmed by this. I know that I'm to trust you, but I need to lay this down. You know, there's a straw that sometimes will break the camel's back. And that's when I think you do see the fan base for sports arenas go crazy, or the people get trampled during, Black Friday, or
right.
It's just like, I don't care. This is my Nintendo Switch, or whatever it might be. That was a super old.
No, that's not too bad. That's not too old.
Nintendo Switch.
Not too bad. You say Super Nintendo.
I didn't say Super. Right. Oh gosh, but I want one of those too.
Those are great.
Let's go back.
I think also with anything, with celebrities too. I'm not trying to make it just about sports, but with anything. If I'm in a place where I am holding people to unrealistic expectations that I would not put on myself, so I think the textbook example for me is any coach at a high level like that, college or pro, more so college because there just seems like there's education issues and all of that stuff. Pro is like, these are grown men, and if they made a mistake, well, then they're just out of here. But a college coach can be held accountable for the actions of a player off campus. If it's violence, if it's education even, and, going to class and all that stuff too. And it's, you get to a place where it is true. They make a lot of money and they know what they're signing up for. They're making $10 million a year. Right. And that's not even including endorsements, right? You're making $10 million a year as a coach. And if you don't win, that's the first thing. Well, you're out of here. We're not going to pay you that if you're not going to win. But also if you don't win or you're mediocre and then some issues come up, well, even though that player acted, a 21-year-old adult acted off campus on something, then where's the coach? Why wasn't the coach there? Why wasn't he doing something about it? And yes, there is that level of some coaches have been fired and the severance package is literally $60 million to just get out of here and do nothing, right? So you don't feel bad for them too much in that instance. But these are real people with real families, with real jobs, and there's so much pressure. And it's like, do I do that also with celebrities? Do I do that to my own bosses? Where you can't, why is the company being run like this? And it's like, man, this is a person doing all that they can.
We're all just people.
We're all just people. And I think that's where you have to go back to it biblically. You have to realize we're talking about the reverence of God. He's up there, we're down here, and most people are just trying to figure it out.
And we're not public property. So if that's true, like the coach, and we may have ideas for the game, or we may have ideas as to how that celebrity should have spoken or not spoken. Just be. I've heard this said and read it even, maybe even thought it at times. Why don't you just do movies?
Oh yeah, get off the political bandwagon
and don't do politics. But at the same time, I was like, Rachelle, maybe it wouldn't be a political thing, but if you were ever in a spotlit situation like that, and you had a chance to stand up for what you truly believed, and a lot of these folks, their belief system is wrapped up in what we can do for the environment, or what we can do for a charity, or because maybe they don't have a faith position.
Sure.
So they pour into whatever that might be. And they're going to use this as an opportunity to speak into it. Wouldn't you share if you had that opportunity about Jesus? Yeah. And the answer is I absolutely would. And there would be a lot of people who want to. So putting ourselves, trying to empathize on any level, and then putting them not in the vilified category, but of people category, then we are putting them in a place of Jesus paying the price for all of them. And I'm in that group. I'm in that listing, so I'm not better than they are. I am another. What did we hear today from a guy? He said, I'm a beggar trying to share with another beggar about a place to get some bread.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, that's good. That's so true. Okay, so we'll do this next time. I'll set it up for because I said punching or pounding people in the face.
Pounding people in the face.
Yeah. I actually wasn't about sports. It was the idea of loving your enemy. And how do you go about that emotionally and tangibly? For example, I got scammed. We got scammed. My wife and I got scammed recently. And I could share a little bit about that. But what do you do when it comes to loving your enemy? And I want to acknowledge we're recording this before the election. So we don't, when this episode's coming out, we'll know, I think, depending on litigation or anything like that, we'll know who the presidential elect is. And so I think that's a key thing to remember of loving our enemy. How does that look? Even if I don't always feel it, I think there's these tangible things that I can go back to, do unto others as I would want them to do to me.
It's especially when you don't feel it. And if you want some homework, there's an episode of The Chosen season 4, and my husband revisited it lately. You can find it on YouTube, when the Roman soldiers asked Jesus and his followers to carry their stuff. Just YouTube it. And I think it's this beautiful expression of what Jesus tells us in that famous sermon of his.
Yeah.
And going the extra mile. It's unbelievable. And it, I think, perfectly represents how we're supposed to love our enemies.
And that is, I'm glad we're recording this before, and I hope you know that we really are. I can show you my phone. It's October 29th. But because I do hesitate that afterwards, what people can feel is that we're just lecturing the people who lost or whatever.
We have no idea who won or lost.
It really does work both ways. Yeah. And so if I have to go, listen, I want to go the extra mile because I wouldn't want somebody to deface my political sign in my yard, even though that person in their mind thinks it's the moral good to take it away or something like that. And so I have to, no matter this, even if I know without a shadow of doubt, this person's an atheist, right? I know that what I have is the truth. I still have to treat them with kindness, with gentleness, love, patience, kindness, gentleness. I mean, all of the fruit of the Spirit should come out no matter what.
Yes,
and there's a limit that I won't go past for the sake of something. The ends don't justify the means.
For God's sake. They will know that we are Christians by our love for one another, and he commissions us to love others.
Yeah.
It's the second greatest commandment.
That's right. That's right.
So, yep.
This is the Anything But Quiet Time podcast. I like that you slowed down on for God's sake.
Yes.
Just to make sure that you weren't
Not
swearing or
saying anything yicky.
It wasn't just an expression. It was you were truly.
Unless somebody accidentally hit that speed up part on the. That wasn't a thing.
All right, we'll see you next week on the Anything But Quiet Time podcast.